Japanese 70s classics is what we will be doing next. And aside from the Honda Life, which is the car we just won, and no to anyone asking, I will not use the Dome Zero because, well, that will make this a bit too easy. And I'm also not going to use my Honda S800 because, well, this event is limited strictly to 70s cars. Although, I think from GT5 onwards they would ultimately allow 60s cars to compete among the 70s cars, if you will. So we don't have any real Japanese 70s cars here, so we are going to have to head over to a dealership to get this sorted out. So I had a look through what options there were, and I've decided for this I'm going to head to Toyota, and I am going, once I can find it. Oh, it's not for sale. Well, that's one plan that's already blown up. Piss. Can't use the Toyota 2000 GT because it's limited to 70s cars. So I'm going to use my next option, which is Mitsubishi, and as I head down to the legendary cars, this is what I will use. The Mitsubishi Lancer 1600 GSR. Believe it or not, I have not driven a... And believe it or not, I have not driven a Mitsubishi Lancer yet. In this one, we can get for $9,000, the Mirage, and the Colt Gallant GTO. I think that might make this a little bit easy. Yeah, I'm going to use this, and because this car is available in green, that's what I'm going to drive it in, because I have not driven a green car yet. So that's what we're using. This 1973 Mitsubishi Lancer 1600 GSR. I'm pretty sure this is the original model. So that's what we're using. And in terms of tuning, I don't think we need to do any. I think we should be fine. Let's go. So we have got 5 races in the Japanese 70s classics, and we've pretty much got the same again for both the 80s and the 90s. So let's begin with the 70s classics. And we can choose any Japanese car made from 1970 to 79, and prize money we get is $2,000 maximum. And the tracks we're going to are Fuji Speedway 80s, understandable. Also got Autumn Ring Mini, Tsukuba Circuit, Motorland, and Trial Mountain. I think this is going to be easy enough, so let's see how we go. And we are starting off with 4 Mitsubishis, unsurprisingly, and 2 Hondas, as we have got the Honda Civic 1500 and the Honda 1300 Coupe. Something tells me this is going to be pretty easy, so yeah, tuning is probably not needed here, from what I can see. Basically, the only thing I really need to do to this thing is take off the driver aids. I I think we should be okay with this, from what I can see. Because the skylines are not involved in this. So, without further ado, let's begin. Yeah, 37 points. Yeah, this is going to be easy. I'm strongly convinced in saying we are going to have no problems here with our first race, as I have already moved up into P2. And a little bit of contact there from the Galant, but I believe we should be fine from here, because we only get 37 points if we win. I am kind of glad to say we did not need to do any tuning here, because, well, since the skylines are not involved in this race, I'm convinced in saying this is going to be pretty easy for me to pull off, with my only real challenger pretty much being the Galant, who is right behind me, but since he's a second back, I don't think we're going to have too many problems with this, from what I can see. So, yeah. Yeah. We've now got a 2-second gap up front. So, yeah, there is no way I'm losing this race, from what I can see. Unless I hit the speed limiter. But aside from that, I think we should be fine. Yeah, 3 seconds. I'm strongly convinced in saying we are going to win this fairly easily. And yep, I knew I was going to run wide through that right-hander. But you know what? I think we should be okay. I have a big enough gap up at the front. Now got a 3-second gap over the Galant. So this is pretty much just business as usual, is what me thinks. So 3.5 seconds is now the interval, and it looks like that is going to remain mostly unchanged. Although I'm pretty sure if we had the Nissans involved in this, then this probably would be a more competitive race. But that is not the case. And it looks as though this is going to be an easy race 1, as I would have expected. And 37 points, easily done. 4.6 seconds is the gap in the end over both the Galant and the Lancer 1600. And as I would have expected, the Mirage fails to finish. But there we go. 2 grand is ours, as is race 1 of the Japanese Classics. So those are your results from race 1. So we will now move on to race 2. Yeah, I'm convinced in saying this one is going to be more competitive, because we've actually got more opponents here. As we've got the Nissan 240ZG, along with the Toyota Celica 1600. Unfortunately, that's a car we cannot buy, as I found out quite harshly. The Honda 1300 Coupe 9S, and we also have the Nissan Skyline Hardtop 2000 GTR. So this is going to be more competitive. As a matter of fact, yeah, 35 points more competitive than what we had before. So I still think it's going to be pretty easy, but either way, I am glad to say that because the Skyline is involved in this now, we've got a bit more of a battle. In other words, we've got the Skyline 2000 GTR involved in this. Which means we are actually going to get to fight the sports cars that I personally thought we were going to be fighting against. So already up into 4th position on the first lap, and now looking to see if I can clear the Toyota Celica. I was kind of sad to say that I could not buy it, but either way, I still picked an equally good car because, well, I chose this. And the Honda Civic is now being overtaken for the lead. And a little bit of contact there on that corner entry, but I think we should be okay. 9/10 is the gap to the 240ZG. He's pulling away just a little bit, but that's more or less what I would have expected. I am closing in on the 240ZG. I figured it was easier for me to just, well, take my time with this. I'm probably going to pass him either way, so I'm convinced in saying we're not going to have too many issues here. So 8/10 is now the gap, and I am continually closing in, also making sure to keep a hold of my Lancer 1600 whilst I'm at it. I also chose this thing in green because, well, why not? I haven't actually driven a car in green yet. And it looks as though once I decide to make my passing maneuver, this is pretty much going to be race over. So, final lap here at Autumn Ring Mini. I know I saved a replay here once before, because I saved my Sunday Cup replay here at Autumn Ring Mini Reverse. This is pretty much going to be my time to strike. The 240ZG has been holding me back up to this point, but I think now is the time for me to strike. And that is what I'm going to do. And looks like it's going to be in the last corner. I go deep to the inside, he backs off, and just like that, 2 out of 2 for the Japanese 70's Cup, and 72 points in what was a close-fought thriller of a battle between my Lancer and the 240ZG, and the Skyline in the end made it up to 3rd. Understandable. But either way, pretty easy win altogether, if I do say so myself, as I won in the end by nearly 1.4 seconds over the 240ZG. Then it was the Skyline who finished in 3rd. Then we got the Civic 4th, the Celica 5th, and at the back was the Honda 1300. Now we move on to race 3. And this time we have got 3 Nissans in this race, along with a Mitsubishi Mirage and a Honda 1300, along with a Nissan Bluebird and of course the 240ZG. Okay, let's go. 3 laps, and this time it's only 60 points. Yeah, I kind of knew something like this was inevitably going to happen. But I'm convinced in saying I don't need any tuning. I am convinced in saying that I can beat the Skyline. Yeah, basically I was just in hang fire mode for most of my previous attempt, and well, I did of course everything in my power to try and go for the win as much as I could, but in the end I came up short because, well, I was attempting a late daring pass on the Skyline to basically try and go for the win, and I almost did, because yeah, doing the same thing I did to the 240ZG before. I think he probably would have done the same thing to me, so it's probably cut and dry, as we're now passing the Nissan Bluebird. It was definitely a close-fought battle between the Skyline and myself on the last lap, and I almost had him at the end, but then basically what happened was I went for a dive bomb at the 3rd hairpin, I think it was, which is down there on the right hand side of the track map, and basically, well, I came close to pulling it off, and I almost did, but unfortunately I was not quite far enough ahead to catch him out, and that's what I'm trying to do here and now. I will give him kudos for beating me first time around, but second time around, I'm convinced in saying I can beat him with no upgrades on this thing, because there's a reason why I bought this thing. I bought it to compete, and I'm a little bit closer now to the Skyline than I was before, so I think we have more of a shot at this compared to what we had before. I am glad to say the Skyline didn't show up at Fuji, because, well, if he did show up at Fuji, then there is a very real shot that he would have definitely beaten me, and my win over the Galant would not have been as easy as it was in the end. 1.3 seconds. Looks like history is about to repeat itself. I think this is where I'm going to have to start going harder on my gear shifts. Harder and higher on the revs. Can I get close enough to pull off a dive bomb? Oh! Yep, I did not mean to do that, but either way, I did have to go for it. And in spite of how stupid that was, it actually worked, because I basically knew I had to go for it. That's not what I would normally do, but either way, I still went for it anyway, and now the skyline is running way out wide. I did not think I was actually gonna get the dive bomb to work, but either way, I still had to go for it, because it was on the last lap and basically all bets were off. I basically had to go for it, or else it would have been a repeat of before. That's not the way I normally like to race, but again, it's the last lap of a race like this, and as long as you don't intentionally wreck your opponent up front, then I think you should be fine. As long as you both stay on the track when the contact is made. I think that's how it works. Anyway. So, crazy finish, but either way, second time around, I pulled it off. And another podium for both the Skyline and the 240ZG. Okay, moving on. And this time, we have got 3 Mitsubishis again, along with 1 Honda and 2 Nissans. But this time we have the Fairlady Z, 280ZL 2-seater. And aside from that, we also have the Nissan Bluebird. Okay. Well, at least I can say the colours are providing their fair share of variety. Still, I think if there was going to be any race that the AI were actually going to beat me, it was probably going to be Tsukuba. That was the most likely candidate. But either way, I did still get the win pulled off. Even though it was from a bit far back, I'll admit, it was still very much a last lap pass that basically had to be done in order to prevent history from repeating itself. Not exactly the way I normally like to race, I admit, but sometimes if you want to make sure you get your vengeance done the right way, sometimes you just have to do it by pretty much being ballsy. And in all honesty, there was probably no other place where I could have realistically pulled off that pass on the Skyline. Now, was the dive bomb a little bit over excessive in some regards? Yes, I think so. I will admit it. In some cases, it was a little bit over excessive, but it was still the last lap, and either way, I had to show that I was going for the dive. I had to at least do something to make sure that the pass was pulled off, just to prevent history from repeating. Just to basically prevent history from repeating itself twice, which is what would have happened had I not gone deep. And yes, it probably was from a bit far back, but either way, I had to pull off the pass somehow. And as long as you both still remain on the track when the contact is made, and you have not intentionally wrecked your opponent, then I think you should be fine. As long as you don't intentionally crash your opponent whilst you're basically pulling off the maneuver. But still, I had to show that I could beat the skyline. And typically you will see maneuvers like that being pulled off in touring car racing on the last lap, where one guy will typically be more ballsy than the other. There are just certain sports where you basically have to go for those last lap maneuvers in order to be successful. Sometimes it works, and other times it doesn't. And I was fortunate to say in my case that it actually worked. And is anyone else going to finish? Okay, the Honda finished. So, Motorland was a pretty cut and dry win for me. And I'm now up to 314,000. And this is where my next replay will be saved. Because I have not saved a replay at Motorland recently. Alrighty. Now we have just one race to go. Let's get to it. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Because we are at Trial Mountain, which, as I know of course, is a high-speed racetrack. And what makes this even more interesting is knowing that we have both the 240ZG and the Fairlady Z in this race. But you know what? I'm going to go with it anyway, because I'm convinced in saying we can win. And we can actually go pretty deep into the red zone regarding our tachometer in terms of revs, regarding the rev counter. Doesn't look like I will. I am trying to go for it. We're almost side by side and I lose again. Well, I almost beat him in a dogfight, but just didn't quite get there in the end. Oh well, we'll try again. I am convinced in saying I can win this, because I was so close to pulling it off on my first attempt. I kind of knew we were gonna encounter these types of shenanigans eventually. Okay, attempt 2 of Lancer 1600 versus Nissan 240ZG. Just as I did at Tsukuba, and Nissan once again bested me because he was slightly faster than me in the long run, but I have established that because I was so close in a side-by-side finish to actually beating him, I'm convinced in saying that no tuning is needed on this thing. As I have now driven 27 miles in this thing, and a little bit of contact there. I have a feeling the 240ZG probably is going to get up to the lead. I almost beat him in a side-by-side battle. now, I'm trying to see if I can pass the Nissan. Well, the Fair Lady Z, if you're asking. And I make a little bit of contact there. And had to get off the gas there because I did not want the pass to be pulled off like that. And through the tight sequence of corners we go, and through these two hairpin turns, and it now looks like the 240 ZG might just be hanging back. So we've still got a pretty important battle here, except for saying this time I'm battling not only the 240 ZG, but the Fair Lady Z as well. So now, since it was previously a case of 71 versus 73, this is years I'm now referring to, it's now a case of 73 versus 78. A battle that I do believe will be resolved soon enough. Or this battle could continue. Either way, I still do it, of course, in the line of making sure that this is done through more or less entertainment purposes, and making sure, of course, that I still have fun whilst I do it. I think we were almost 3 wide for a moment there. I honestly couldn't tell for sure, but it felt like we were nearly 3 wide. And here comes the 240 ZG again. He passes both of us. I will let him have the passing manoeuvre this time, because I'm convinced in saying that I can get him back, since I've had a stronger run this time around compared to last time. Looks like history could repeat itself, but I'm not going to allow it to, as I'm on the inside, and on the inside line over the 240 ZG. Looks as though this time around I did try passing him in the last corner, but he was not being passed. I was very close to beating him last time, but this time I get it done. I run it back and I beat him by 1 second as a result of my daring plot to get the maneuver done. But there we go. The Japanese 70s Classics is now done, after I was beaten in 2 of these 5 races. Beaten on my first attempt in both of them, but I ran it back and I got revenge on my other 2 attempts. Anyway, replay has already been saved, so yeah. Pretty close battle altogether. I kind of knew I was going to be battling the Nissans at some point in this event, because they were clearly the fastest cars. And what we get? I am not surprised. We get the Nissan Skyline Hardtop 2000 GTR from 1970. This is about as unsurprising as it gets. Although part of the reason for that is, well, because I did do the research prior to this, just to find out what I was up against. But either way, there we go. So, 3 wins of 5 on my first try. The other 2 had a little bit of trouble, but either way, I did more or less get it done. And that's now our first single race event done and dusted. And next up will be the 80s. And wonder where that puts me stats-wise. 86.5%. Yeah, I kind of knew that was going to happen at some point. Anyways, 28.3% complete, so I think we gained another 0.8% of progress, if I'm not mistaken. And I have now switched cars 33 times up to this point of the game. And that is inevitably going to continue. But first, let's look for our skyline. Here is our skyline. In silver metallic, the Nissan Skyline GTR Hardtop 2000. Or, to put it more simply, the 2000 GTR. I think this is also the second generation model Skyline. Second or third. I'm convinced in saying this is the second gen model, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, that's what we get from the Japanese 70s classics. And next time we will be doing the Japanese 80s challenge, coming in the next episode.